Hi, I'm Paul. I've worked here at NVK for a few years now.
I'm Rebecca Parker of Parker Horticultural Services, formerly from NVK Nurseries.
Hi, I'm Jonas Vandenbrink, and this is my steel horse Marianne, and together we work in shipping and receiving here at NVK Holdings.
I'm Sean James. I'm the owner of Sean James Consulting and Design. I teach with Mohawk College in the horticultural apprenticeship program, and I work with Landscape Ontario, and I am really excited about helping people understand how to work with plants and stack plants and move plants and keep them safe and keep us safe.
We are going to demonstrate how to fit everything in with some room for other trees, bigger trees, and to stack it, handle it carefully with no damage.
The whole point of today's demonstration is to show you how to transport plants from the nursery to your job site. Now, when plants are in the nursery, they are in their optimal care. They are given all of the sun, all of the water they need. They're not moved around too much, so they're happy. Now, when we move them from the nursery to the job site in transportation, sometimes damage and trauma can be caused to the plants. So our goal here is to reduce the stress of the plants from nursery to job site.
So as you can see, there are lots of plants here, and it looks like we're not going to fit everything in. There are things you can do carefully. For example, ground covers take up a lot of room, but if you do this carefully, the weight is sitting on the flat, not on the plants. And if you have some taller ground covers, you could even get away with laying them on top like that.
Paul, that's because it takes the weight, is it? It holds the weight on the side so that they're not putting weight on each other?
There is
Understanding that properly?
There is no weight on the plants as it is right now. All the weight is sitting on the flats. For another demo, let's do it. So use our best grown in a field and best dug in a ball and a burlap, as you see here. It means much less root disturbance. Oh, and Sean, why are we loading the back end of the trailer?
Well, ultimately you want your weight when the whole trailer is loaded on the middle of the axles and slightly forward so that the truck is carrying some of the weight. When you accelerate, there isn't a whole bunch of force there, but when you brake, things tend to shuffle forward. So this helps hold things more securely over the entire duration of the run.
This is the proper way to carry a taxus, or rather any B&B plant. You do not want to grab them by the top of the plant, or by the hair, as we say. We want to make sure we're grabbing it from the stable root ball and not putting any pressure on the branches, especially with taxus, because they tend to break very easily and can cause browning and death on the branches.
Some plants are more susceptible than others. Taxus and thuya will both strip the bark from the cambium, and everything looks fine until you get 2 weeks after planting, and then you get a whole bunch of tips or more dying back.
Now Paul is starting what we call an angle stack.
There's a bunch of different types of ways to stack things, and we're going to try and show you those different ways. What's this called when you have them sort of ball on top of ball but face to face?
We call that a Fairview stack, only because we learned it from the folks who sell us Fairview U's.
Now this is an angle stack, your general angle stack. You want to get the bottom row nice and secure so that you can counterbalance the rows above it. Now this is a great way to save space. It can save tons of footage if you're doing it properly.
And you're just sort of weaving the top plant in between the branches below it. so as not to damage the branches. Now, these dogwoods are pretty straightforward, but you have to be a little more careful with the lilacs, don't you?
The lilacs are difficult to stack. They are very bushy, so I will use them on the top shelf, whatever, shelf only.
Now, some plants are very susceptible to breaking and damage during this part of the process. So we need to make sure that we are aware of the way that the branches are coming out of the pots, so we are not breaking branches as we are going. So now what we're going to demonstrate is what we call a double stack. Now this is for if you're not trying to jam thousands of plants into your trailer. It's more for if you have a smaller load. This is just a way to save some space. So you can see from what Paul's done here that he's taken basically 2 or 3 of them, and then you kind of put one in between, almost like a pyramid. Yes, a pyramid. And this way the plants can't move while they're being transported, and it provides a secure base.
As it sits this way, if the driver hits the brakes, it can't fall this way. If he floors it, okay, truck probably doesn't have enough power anyway, but it can't fall back, it can't fall to the side, it can't fall to the side. And now I have a continuation of that angle, and I can continue with tall things again.
So again, to start the angle, sometimes it's easier if you place your foot underneath the bottom of the first section of pots you're doing. It makes it less aggravating to stack, and it makes it more secure for your next row.
I do need 2 more little plants underneath. And as we do a regular double stack, you try to brush up the branches of the one below and then slide the next one underneath.
Again, going back to that, watching your placing of plants and making sure you're not squishing the branches when you're stacking them.
And I can continue my angle stack.
Now it's easier to angle stack when you have a section of 3 gallons and then switch to a section of 2 gallons rather than mixing up the pots. It just stays a lot better and it will hold a lot better.
These are miserable to stack. I can sneak one in there. Okay, that's a little too tall. I should have started another row, but you get the idea.
You have been known to completely unstack and restart.
It doesn't, I'm not that proud that I can't undo, reset, and start over. Another one. You get the idea. Narrow one and a wide one. Hey, this guy. This is not the way to grab a plant. It can be done, yes, but yeah, it's only a cotoneaster, but still, let's be nice.
It's fair to say that some plants are more tolerant than others.
True.
Now, see the way you tipped that on its side? Water came out? That's something we've mentioned in the past. So that's about surface tension, if memory serves.
Very good.
My friend Paul de Groot taught me that.
If this thing is sitting level, it'll hold that water. As soon as you have it on an angle, it starts losing water because of that surface tension thing. So if you keep in mind that all of these plants are losing water, even though they are fairly dry already, they are going to dry out even more. So you do want to keep in mind when you get to the job site, unload the truck fairly soon, park the plants in the shade if you can.
And give them a squirt of water.
And give them some more water.
Because as Rebecca said, it's all about stress reduction. This is the toughest time on plants, whether you're digging, dividing, planting, moving. We're putting them in a situation where they're easy to damage, and they're too darn special to damage.
So this is a 7-gallon pot that Paul is now stacking. And we do the same sort of angle stack situation as we would do with the smaller pots. However, we need to be a little bit more careful because of the branching of these trees / larger shrubs. Paul is going to demonstrate how we reduce more stress and damage by using buffers in between our layers of trees.
Generally, you'll notice that we started to simplify things a little bit with the small stuff at the beginning and get bigger and bigger and bigger as we get to the end of the trailer. Which is another reason that perhaps
if I were to lay that there, this thing's going to bounce all down the road, and where that stem is leaning into those handles and or any sharp-edged pot, we will try to put a plant protector. And that can be one of these. That's a noisy little thing. That can be waxed cardboard, which is probably the best. And this brings to mind another thing. Here's a tree with a bamboo stake to help it grow correctly. Do not be tempted to grab it like that, because you're driving that bamboo stake into the bark and potentially damaging cambium layer.
Now, if that tree were a little bit taller, if you can pass me that piece of plastic there, what I've seen you do in the past is just bungee this to the top, because the same as that's going to be rubbing, this is going to be rubbing the whole way, and you get where you're going, and now you've got a great big wound on the trunk or broken branches, depending. That is a beautiful and special plant, that.
And you'd be tempted to use a t-shirt, jacket, whatever.
Really anything that you have lying around.
It works, but I don't like cloth. If you can feel this, you can feel this. And it's going to scratch, and it's going to scar, and it's going to rub all the way to the job site.
And this is going to shift and move as you drive, as you've mentioned, so that has more of a chance of blowing out as you go too. You've got to keep in mind that you're building this to last. This is a feat of engineering in many ways.
What else we got? Continue with that.
Now, we use all kinds of things at the nursery to do this. Now, like Paul said, cardboard, waxed cardboard is probably one of our best options, but whatever you have, with you will work as well. Cloth, not exactly ideal. I've seen people use burlap. I've seen people use plastic tubing, anything that you can to reduce that stress, really, and damage mostly in this case.
Where you put the weight on the trailer is very important, because if you have the weight too far to the back, you get, I don't know if it's the proper term or not, but a speed wobble built up. As you start to drive, the trailer can sort of have a mind of its own and start to wiggle back and forth, and it'll start to rock back and forth. And I've seen them bounce from tire to tire and spin a trailer all the way around. The trailer more or less gets a mind of its own. Unless the vehicle is accelerating, then it's not pulling the trailer straight, and the trailer can spin the whole vehicle around and cause fatalities. And we have to remember that what we do is very dangerous and
can be very dangerous.
The danger can be mitigated.
And we are doing our best to mitigate the potential.
And living with disasters is not easy. And whether it's you or your crew or the people driving in vehicles around you, in our industry we have to always remember the potential for disaster and be aware of how to deal with that.
You might not think that taking a load of trees from a nursery to a job site would really be that complicated or tough. And it's not if you do everything properly. But there are so many things that could go wrong, like Sean said, safety-wise. Even driving, you never know what could happen. So it's always important to be cautious and to be safe for everyone around you on the road.
I trust your driving. It's that guy in front of you who is unpredictable, and you may need to hit the brakes and or swerve, and we want these plants to stay where they are until they get to the job site.
And we also don't want the MTO after you.
We're a little concerned about them.
There are many things you can use to reduce the damage of the plant material. So something we use on the nursery, this is waxed cardboard. So this is something that's actually meant to go around the trunk, but you can use it flat, like so. There are other options like fabric, however, they're not as favorable. This is felt. This is also something that can be wrapped around the trunk of the tree, or again, placed like so. And then we've got regular cardboard, which also works. You can break it into smaller pieces if need be. Another thing that we have used are dog food bags, or some other sort of like burlap, or like Sean has just given me. We have these as well, and these are actually made to go around the tree trunk as well, or again, can be placed flat.
So here at NVK, we move a lot of trees really fast. And the way we do that is using machines like these with hydraulic forks that can open and close to adjust the size of each basket that we're doing. Different trees come in different sizes, and the size of the ball changes too. These little accessories here are called sliders, and what they do is they fit right onto your forks and they distribute how much tension you're putting onto the basket from the outside.
And if you can picture, okay, I'm too lazy to bring in a whole lot of trees for this demonstration, but if you can picture more wire basket trees, taller trees, they'd be resting on that back rail where possible every time. Lay a piece of cardboard here because the stem of the next tree will be lying on these wires, and they will scar and burr and scratch all the way there. The MTO requires, okay, this trailer has sidewalls, so it doesn't need it quite as badly, although it officially does. The MTO requires a strap holding down these trees. You want that strap to be sitting right there on the center of the ball, pulling straight down. You can't put it on the front end like this, because all you got to do is go over one bump. The ball moves this way and the strap is loose. Same for the back end. Can't be pulling forward, can't be pulling toward the back. You want that strap to be on the center, holding it straight down.
And for the tree's sake, you don't want it going over the trunk of the tree.
Yes, I hope that goes without saying. I have seen people strap on top of the stem, and that strap will burr, scrub, scratch all the way to the job site. Carefully laid that down.
Paul, many years ago, I was driving along and I saw someone with a euonymus standard, so a broadleaf evergreen on a stick, and they had it buckled around the stem just below the head of the euonymus and to either side of the gunnel, and with the head of the euonymus sticking up over the top of the pickup truck. And as I drove alongside, coming up on a stoplight, I looked over and the poor euonymus was frozen in position in horror, going, "Ah!" And I burst out laughing right in the guy's open window, which maybe I shouldn't have done, but what he was doing to that poor plant was unforgivable.
It was way too late to save the plant.
This is true, yes.
So this is how to tie a tree. Before you transport anything like this, you usually want to tie it up. It takes up less space and it leaves stuff from dangling out and hitting each other and damaging stuff. So what you're going to do is you take the tree and you find underneath all the branches you want to tie up, and you just tie one knot there, just a holder there, and then you come up and wrap around and go underneath your rope there. But you don't want to reef on it and cause damage, so you just make sure it's taut but not tight, and you keep coming up, pulling all these branches in. And now that I've got the majority of it done, I'm just going to tie a knot here, hold it all together. And that's it.
Tying trees, one thing. Untying them is something else. Come on. I should sharpen my shears before I try to do this. Follow that rope and follow that whole rope. Okay, this larch is losing its needles, but it's supposed to be losing its needles. It should be deciduous.
That's a large larch.
That is a larch. There, open it up. But if you follow that rope back to that center, there is one tied around the stem, one end. If you do not remove that stem, that last string, that plastic string will choke that plant, and the sun will not have enough time to deteriorate that string before it chokes the plant. I've seen at job sites plants growing up to yay, and come a big wind, top end breaks off.
If you don't remove the string, you will remove the stem.
There you go.
And the same applies with going back and removing wires and stakes years later, which we don't even like using the wires anymore. Biodegradable
Some
cloth.
of us do.
Most wire baskets will be tied like that because the nursery has tied them up to dig them. So almost every wire basket tree you will receive, whether it's deciduous or coniferous, will have that rope on it. So you need to make sure that no matter what it is, even if you can't see it, you have to follow it and cut it off, or it will girdle and maybe kill the tree.
Not every landscaper has the technology of that little forklift with the hydraulic forks and the accessory with the to spread the weight or the damage on the ball. Most landscapers unload their trailers, trucks with chains on a bucket or on a fork, whatever. When you are hooking up that basket, make sure that you hook your chain on a cross of the wire, like so, rather than on a single loop, or as Sean was talking earlier, I've seen people wrap a chain right around the stem and lift it up and scratch and scar and kill a poor tree.
Now, you're talking about the root balls there. It's worth mentioning, I think, that the root ball of the tree, you have to be very gentle with this. Every time you fracture or move the root ball, all those little tiny root hairs get pulled and removed. And what we're talking about over and over again is stress reduction. So every time you pull those little root hairs off, the tree cannot take up any water, it cannot cool itself, it cannot bring up nutrients until it grows a new bit of root and new root hairs. So being gentle with the root ball is extremely important for the longevity of that tree.
Most of the roots on any tree are in the top 3-4 inches here. So when I mentioned the thing about the strap earlier for the MTO, the strap has to be there to be most effective, but that is also doing damage to the basket, to the roots. You take the good with the bad. The MTO requires that strap, but don't crank it tight like you don't want it to move. Be nice to it. All right, provided the tarp is folded correctly, this is an easy process. You should be able to roll it out. It's supposed to work like that. Each grab a corner, whether you do this by hand or with a machine, lift it up high enough and cover it up, and try not to bend the tip of whatever trees might be sticking past your dovetail ramp. Tying. Tie the front two corners first, pulling sort of forward. Okay, this thing hasn't got enough tie spots. First thing you're gonna do after Congress is weld a rod right there to tie to. I can cheat. Happy rope. And then tie the back corners, and not necessarily the back corner, but something near the back end, pulling a little bit back. Go around it twice. And a simple slip knot works. And the rest of the ropes get tied pretty much straight down so it can't go anywhere. When you're tying the back, again, you have to picture, you need to picture trees possibly sticking out past here. You don't necessarily need to tie everything back to the trailer. You could quite easily tie this one underneath and that one coming back this way underneath. If you were to tie everything back to the trailer, you'd be like catching the wind, and the idea here is to deflect as much wind as you can. You're not trying to catch it like building a parachute.
There are different tarps for different purposes. And what we're on about here, you want a mesh tarp. This is going to allow air to flow through. If you use the cheap poly tarp, it is going to do this the whole way you're driving and beat your plants to death before they get there. It's been mentioned that some of the big trailers have rubber tarps on them. Imagine that sitting in the sun for an hour or so, and you're going to bake the plants inside. Think about the tools that you're taking with you. If you forget to bring your tarp, the very first time I came to NVK Nurseries, I was not allowed off the grounds by Paul before I bought a mesh tarp, because he knew how bad it would be for my plants. And you know what? It doesn't hurt to educate your colleagues. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I don't think of anybody as the competition. I think of all of us as colleagues, and as such, the more we share information, the stronger we all are.
And we are at the job site. The trailer made it all the way there, and all the plants are still alive so far. We will untie the tarp. You tied it too well over there. We're going to pull it again with the grain of the plants.
So as to
not break the branches.
And now, Paul and Jonas are going to show you how to properly fold a tarp. Now, when you're using tarps...
Easily fold the tarp.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's good.
Easily fold the tarp.
Yes, this is a very easy way of making sure that your tarp always gets put away nicely and neatly, so the next time you go to use it, you can just kind of flick it out over your trees and tarp away.
They're very accordionated.
Oh. Oh.
I love that. That needs to stay in.
And when you get to the job site, fold the tarp properly and put it where it goes. This may sound simple, but it won't be in your way. If you were to leave it here, it won't be in your way while you're unloading the rest of the trailer. And there's always somebody watching. The neighbor across the street is watching you do this job. If the first thing you do when you get to that job site is fold the tarp properly and put it where it belongs, you've already made a great impression on somebody who is not even connected to the job.
File that with keeping your truck clean, keeping yourselves clean, keeping your job site neat overall, all part of professionalism, and it really makes a difference. I know companies who've got jobs because of that.
If you don't have your name painted on the side of your truck, you already look sketchy. If it looks clean and neat, customers will pay for the privilege of having your vehicle in their front yard.
And the authorities are going to be looking more at a truck that looks beat up and dirty than they are at a truck that's nice and neat and clean. Several years ago, me and my gang were tasked with rescuing a bunch of trees from Canada Blooms, taking them all the way back to Landscape Ontario, putting them in the greenhouse for bringing them back for the Green Living Show. And one of my students was good enough to loan me their gigantic covered trailer. I brought my big strong men, and we're trying to squeeze all these trees in this big covered trailer. And we're not going to make it. It's going to be 3 trips, clearly. And I see Paul in the distance loping past a doorway. I'm like, Paul, come help. And he comes over, looks in the door, and goes, take it all out. And I said, if you're going to do this, can you teach my people how to do it your way? Sure. And literally managed to squeeze all of that, 3 loads worth of stuff, into 1 load in a covered trailer. So even more congested than normal. So it can be done, and it requires a bit of methodical, it requires a bit of fastidious, but when they come off the trailer, you don't necessarily have to have a broken branch. It can all be done and be done well.